2019 MillbrookEngage Chapel Talk. I'm Jackie Crowley. I'm a 4-year 6th former, and me and my peers were the 4th group to complete the MillbrookEngage program. For all of you who don't know, MillbrookEngage is a unique opportunity to do service-based work for a non-for-profit while still getting paid through the school. Your programs can range from 6 to 8 to 10 weeks depending on what you're doing and what you're interested in. You learn a lot of transferable skills such as writing resumes, doing cover letters, and conducting interviews, which are really good for college. It's open to all rising 6th formers, and it's a really, truly great opportunity. And now Jonathan's going to do some introductions.
Thank you, Jackie. All right. Hello, my name is Jonathan Anastasia. I'm a 4-year 6th former. And before we begin speaking about our summer experience, I'd like to make a few introductions. First, I'd like to introduce Mr. Herb Schultz, class of 63. Mr. Schultz founded the MillbrookEngage Summer Internship Program with the intent to give Millbrook students an opportunity to serve a non-for-profit organization that aligned with their passion. So with that, thank you, Mr. Schultz, for making this opportunity possible. Next, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Evelyn Garzetta, Executive Director for Grace Immigration Outreach, and Mr. Dennis Wedlick, founder of Barless Wedlick Architects. We are honored to have 2 of our intern mentors in the audience tonight. I had the pleasure to work alongside Mr. Wedlick this past summer as I assisted him with his pro bono work to combat the housing insecurity crisis. To speak a little bit about Mr. Wedlick's work, he's been working with Columbia County Habitat for Humanity for a number of years to build passive homes for the rural workforce to combat the housing insecurity crisis. This project is called the Rural Build. To provide some context, the average income for a farmer in Ancrum is about $30,000 a year, and the average price for a home in that area is $300,000. It's very difficult for a farmer living in this area to support their family when their home is 10 times more expensive than their annual income. By building passive homes, farmers and their families will be able to cut the cost of living by a significant amount, making their lives easier and less stressful. My work was divided into 2 parts, helping Mr. Wedlick with his work on the Rural Build and supporting the office with general day-to-day tasks. I assisted with the research on housing insecurity. Dennis used these research in presentations to inform other architects about the Rural Build. Also, I had the opportunity to sit with Dennis and Brenda Adams, the Executive Director for Columbia County Habitat for Humanity, as they influenced other New York County's Habitat for Humanity programs to partner in this effort. It was a very successful meeting, as 5 out of the 8 representatives agreed to consider doing similar work. One really big thing I took away from this experience is that life is expensive. Ever since I was young, my dad has always said, if you want to live out here, you've got to work hard for it, because it's expensive. But I never really acknowledged his remarks until after having this experience. Thank you.
I'd like to thank my boss, Miss Evelyn Garzetta, for coming all the way out here from Millerton, New York. I'm Nathaniel Clisby. I'm a 5th former, and for about 8 weeks, I worked as her soldier. Ms. Garzetta runs a program called Grace Immigrant Outreach, which provides basic services and legal advocacy for immigrants in the area. Being a pawn in Geo was, I got a variety of tasks, mostly driving around doing basic services. I drove around doing food deliveries and ESL lessons, and I don't speak Spanish very well, so mostly I'm working with people that are speaking more Spanish or that speak more English, and I help them with things like resumes, applications to schools or to jobs. I did that for about 8 weeks, and she'd love to have anyone else from the program or from the school come out and work for her.
Hi guys, my name is Charlotte, and I am a 4-year 6th former, and this summer I worked at the Mason Lab at Weill Cornell Medicine in New York City. and I was studying DNA and genome sequencing using DNA from 3 of our red pandas at the Trevor Zoo. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because I'm a curator at the Trevor Zoo, and something that I'm passionate about is trying to find a way to better the care that we give our animals. So the purpose of this project was to look at the microbiome of the red panda, to be able to look at the bacteria in their DNA, to better understand their genetic makeup. So I will actually be continuing this project through my ISR class, Independent Science Research, and I'll be shifting my focus a little bit. I will be studying epigenetics and how it correlates with animal welfare. And a takeaway that I had from this project is just what it's like to work every day in a lab setting. I was doing other things besides just working on my project. I was going to lab meetings, helping with other little projects, so it wasn't just when I was working.
Hi everyone, so I'm Jack. I'm a 4-year 6th former. This past summer I worked with an organization called Canned Aid. My experience was a little different with MillbrookEngage because they're based in Colorado, so I worked from home. It was a lot of self-motivation, which was kind of hard at the beginning, but I got into a routine. I worked under their director of engagement, so their head fundraiser, and I did fundraising for the most part. So a lot of what I did was grant writing and research. So it was a lot of time in front of a computer, pouring through a database, finding potential funding opportunities that lined up with the organization and their programs. Once I found opportunities, I wrote grant applications, so I started crafting language, and then I applied for grants, and we're still waiting to hear back from a lot of those. When I wasn't doing that, I was helping with program development, so it was more writing, but it was geared towards sort of advertising and the volunteer experience, so making documents to help their experience go smoothly. And then finally, I did some actual hands-on volunteering, which was super cool. In the video, the picture of me holding a skateboard was from a build where we built hundreds of skateboards and then donated them to a Title I school. And then I did a few other tasks here and there. A lot of it was getting through the slog with my mentor and trying to get the trivial tasks out of the way so she could focus on the bigger picture. So I thought I was going to be like changing the world and building 15 houses a day. It wasn't that, but it was still pretty meaningful.
Hi, I'm Gabriella Kriki, and I'm a 4-year 6th former, and this past summer I had the pleasure of interning at the Gordon Parks Foundation in Pleasantville, New York. And the executive director is actually Millbrook alum, Peter Kuhnhart Jr., class of 2001, and I learned a lot from him while I was there. So the Gordon Parks Foundation is a nonprofit organization that keeps the legacy of Gordon Parks alive, and Gordon Parks was a civil rights photographer. And they also give fellowships to young artists, and they host exhibitions in their gallery space, and they are in charge of loaning all of the work that they have of Gordon Parks, and they have a huge archive full of everything that he's ever done. So what I did, I mostly helped with the general upkeep of the archive because it really takes a lot to keep an archive organized, especially with the amount of stuff that they have over his career. I also helped with the organization of the archive, whether it be like refiling things, putting them into different boxes and stuff, and I also helped organize the online database, which is really important. So one of the ways that I feel like I've really impacted them was for most of the time I was there, I was doing this project of digitizing a lot of the contact sheets that they haven't really had the time to get to. So that was something that really helped them. Like Jack said, it kind of cleared up their time to do bigger tasks that were more important. And one of the ways they've impacted me beyond giving me transferable skills like building a resume and just knowing what it's like to work in an archive, I'm also working with the people I work with at the Gordon Parks Foundation for my CES this year, where I am curating a show full of Gordon Parks photography in the chapel. So yeah.
Just to introduce myself, I'm Jackie, and I'm a 4-year 6th former, and then this summer I interned at the Danbury Hospital in in the hospital itself, and then at the biomedical research lab. So my internship was split into 2 parts. The first part, I worked under Kathleen Hardy, who's the director of volunteers at Danbury Hospital. While I was there, I got to do a lot of hospitality cards and directly interact with patients, helping better their experience, either by giving them free gifts or showing families where their patients were when they were in the ER. I also did a lot of tasks such as filing to help my mentor plan larger events for the volunteers. And then the second part, I worked at the biomedical research lab under the head researcher, Donna Gralski. I studied E. coli bacteria as well as the bacteria that's the leading cause of Lyme disease, running both DNA and protein tests. That was a big because my mentor is currently working on a project with Lyme disease, so we were testing to make sure that the samples were viable for her research. It was a really great experience and it inspired me a lot, so my independent science research project is going to continue to work with E. coli, studying antibiotic resistance to see if natural remedies can be a substitute for synthetically produced antibiotics.
My name's Andrew Lim. I'm a 3-year 6th former, and this summer I worked for the New York State Supreme Court under the Honorary Justice Maisley in the Commercial Division. So a lot of work was done. The first thing that I spent actually a lot of my time on was watching trials. Some of them you'll definitely know. A lot of these people I met. Robert De Niro is going through his divorce. That was interesting. The NFL, all 32 teams, there's a big thing going on right now with concussions right now. My judge handled that case. Goldman Sachs, Google, because of her connections actually, I was fortunate enough to sit front row in just about I think every single one of the Epstein arraignments. So if you guys were following the news and you know who he is. Other work that was done was case briefs for the judge. On occasion, those were very difficult, so I didn't complete them all as fast as law students. I also helped organize the AJSCSNY annual conference. All the Supreme Court justices for the state of New York have an annual conference that's required for them, and it was a little bit hectic trying to get approved accreditation for all the programs, and yeah. And then finally, probably the biggest issue that I ended up working on this summer was the New York State Constitutional Cap. The judge is a member of the New York City Bar Association, and currently there's actually an issue in our system where OCA, the governing body of our judicial system for the state of New York, has been taking judges and bringing them up from lower courts into acting supremes. And what that's doing is it's taking away judges from the lower courts, and that's about millions upon millions of citizens every day that are being harmed in their litigation proceedings because there just aren't enough judges to go around. So I did research for her and did a presentation on that to the courts. So that was my internship. So I know we had 2 threads to review here now. That there are going to definitely be some tough parts that might arise in your internship experience. I know for me, it was really just keeping track of all the assignments that were given to me, being able to keep track of time. I can tell you that you really just need to be organized in all these things. I think that a lot of people here on this panel are going to relate to that. But there are definitely a lot of upsides. One of the greatest things I think I learned this summer was just how broad the jurisdiction is for our court system. We had international people from other nations coming in from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, judges from their version of our United States Supreme Court coming in to just get a feel for what it's like here in America, and they have some really interesting perspectives. They hate the jury trial system, and for us it's probably one of the most expressive forms of democracy we have here. It's just really interesting to hear about this stuff, and you really get to meet some cool people. United States Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor was probably among those people and probably among my favorites that I got to meet this summer. But you know, it's well worth the challenges that you might face in your experiences, and you definitely rest about them. I know Jackie definitely had a very interesting one.
So the first week after the start of my internship, I broke my right wrist playing field hockey, which definitely was a major setback. I couldn't do my internship for about 2 weeks. But I definitely learned the importance of being upfront and communicating with people and just trying to make the best of a situation. I definitely learned to be like on top of things, communicate with my mentor, and just push myself to find other ways I could contribute.
So I didn't break my wrist, but one of the challenges that I faced was that I had to commute every morning from the city to Pleasantville, and I had to wake up really early, get on a train. It was a lot to handle in 1 week, going back and forth, but it kind of made me realize that if I put my mind to something, I can get into the swing of things and do what I need to do, so that was really amazing.
So similar to Gabby, one of my challenges was just living and working in New York City. I'm not from the city, I'm from Madison, Connecticut, so I spent 4 days of the week staying in New York. I had to get up at 5 a.m. on Monday morning to drive to New Haven to catch a 2-hour train to work on time. And I was kind of just living out of a suitcase for 8 weeks of my summer, so that was definitely something I had to get used to and overcome. And definitely, I just had a lot more independence just walking around the city on my own, so that was something I had to learn to do.
Yeah, so I had a challenge. I lived about 50 minutes away from my internship, so I also didn't have my license, so my parents had to drive me every day. So thank you to them. But it was well worth the drive because I had an awesome experience. Thank you.
Okay, so that is our program. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that we piqued your interest. The MillbrookEngage program is open to rising sixth formers, so current fifth formers. If you are interested in having an internship next year, please reach out to any one of us. We would be happy to answer questions, talk to you more in depth about our experiences, and give you advice for moving forward. The most important thing is that you find something you want to do, and you really just start to research and dig in. Yeah, that's all we got.